So we're back for episode 69.
Fine. How
69
time flies.
of Powers and Principalities. And this week I thought it was appropriate to talk about, I think you agreed, corporations, particularly the corporation and the New World Order, basically how perhaps this is the way they are imposing tyranny through terms and conditions, human resources policies, and maybe corporate philanthropy, that old trick, because of the oligarchs that control the corporations. So corporations in the New World Order, of course, corporations as entities, as corporate personhood. I think it dates back to the 1880s with the Santa Clara County versus Southern Pacific Railroad. That's when corporations were deemed or determined by the court to enjoy rights like individuals. Basically, they were protected by the 14th Amendment, and then there was off to the races. So you have this corporate privilege, corporate protection. That coupled also limited liability creates a rather rich environment for our types of, I think, misbehavior, psychopathic behavior, psychopathy, corporate psychopathy. We talk about the psychopathy of the organization, whether it's the CIA or ExxonMobil or something, how individuals, it's so compartmentalized that no one has any real direct responsibility for the results of corporate policies, these things. And so no one ever is really held accountable, and they get away with a heck of a lot. There's also a lot of corporate power. You have vast concentration of wealth, which they can use to more or less buy out the government, which they did long ago. We have a dollar democracy in this country. And if you believe that, if we actually believe we have one man, one vote, then you can say that my vote mattered when I voted as much as David Rockefeller's. Sure. That's not the case, of course, but we're not going to really examine corporate personhood itself as an issue. I think it's part of it. We're talking about how much of the New World Order agenda could be being implemented through the corporations, not so much through overt laws and legislation being passed, but through corporate measures and policies and such. And so that's what I wanted to talk about tonight. Joe, what do you have to say about the corporation and the New World Order?
Well, they're one and the same. The definition of fascism is the union of government and business, and the corporations that have a lot of power in our world are the very definition of that. They are fused with the government, but moreover, the corporations are reflecting the secret society. I know this is I'm a scratchy record about this, but corporations are odd legal entities. The individuals inside them who supposedly benefit from them and also direct them, they cannot be sued. The corporation is basically established as a legal veil to protect these individuals. The idea, of course, was, or as it was sold, was that then you could amalgamate capital, right? That was how it was sold to the public, that you'd give businesses this special legal privilege where the individuals wouldn't have any liability. And so basically corporations are the legal structure of a psychopath, right? I mean, you can just be as, every immoral thing, every violent criminal act that you can legally get away with, you can do, and there's no moral issue in terms of the individuals. Now, just think about this. This is really, I thought when you brought up this as a potential subject, I was thinking about it, and I think how amazing it is. Think of the damage that corporations have done in our world. I mean, just the obvious environmental damage, but also the financial damage. But how often do we actually hear a shareholder coming forward and complaining about the immorality of the corporation that he or she is a shareholder in, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, this happens from time to time, but relative to the destruction, it's like maybe one in like a billion or something, would actually step forward. So there's a kind of numbness about business behavior that has been basically conditioned into us. When you think of the destruction of, say, Amazon, look at Amazon as an example. Amazon has destroyed so many businesses, right? The small retail spaces have been and are being wiped out by, the Amazon corporation. But you occasionally hear a politician raise an issue about that, but rarely do you hear any Amazon shareholders saying, "Gee, we've really got to think about, what is the, moral consequence of our business plan." In fact, honestly, I was looking, when I was thinking about this, I was trying to find some news story where shareholders had complained about it. It's never the case. So what's happened, in my opinion, is that that we have been the victims of another kind of mind control programming, where corporations, we've become used to them, they've been normalized as being in our lives, and the fact that they are psychopaths is just something we have learned to accept. We just use Amazon, buy some product, it gets delivered, and we don't think about what that actually means in terms of, both the control of this corporation, if it becomes, monolithic, which I think it clearly will, and also what the moral consequence is in terms of businesses that it's been replacing. And I'll just wrap it up by saying, the problem with runaway corporatism is that it ends up with monopoly, obviously, right? And I think that the large corporations now, the ones that have power, like Google, Amazon, Facebook, these large corporations are obviously fused with the government, fused with the secret society. Mm-hmm. But they are, their business plan will eventually become a kind of monopoly. It's, in other words, where everything will be, our entire world will be through them. You can see the vast plan of the internet world, is how they're going to try to onset all this, where the only place you can get anything will be Amazon. It was very depressing when they bought Whole Foods, which was a store that I would from time to time, not often, but because it's so expensive, but sometimes I would buy things from them. But when Amazon controls it, I mean, how can you trust this, right? If you look at something that is basically a psychopathic corporation.
Well, the Washington Post will scrutinize Amazon as a corporation. Oh.
Wait a second. Yeah. So there it is. So you see, when and I'm glad you brought up the origins of corporations of having rights, because a lot of times, people they'll not realize how slowly this is onset, and how 100 years ago this would have been fought aggressively by the citizenry, right? There was an aggressive citizenry that was defending democracy, and it's really a sad comment, and it shows how successful they've been at making us numb to the business structure of enslavement, because that's really what you're looking at. The communications are owned, the delivery systems are owned, the production of food is owned. Obviously, all of the so-called pharmaceuticals are owned. I mean, you have corporations which cannot be, the individuals inside cannot be sued. And I would just say that kind of if you want to see the model of where we're heading, look at the relationship between pharmaceutical companies who produce vaccines and the legal system. They were able to get this idea that they are unavoidably unsafe. So now the corporations themselves cannot be sued, even not let alone the individuals inside. So yeah, I mean, the corporations are not the problem. They are simply, well, they are a problem. They are the way that the oligarchs are implementing a kind of slavery without the people being aware it's going on. We see business aspects, but we're not seeing that these are structures in our slavery.
Yeah, it's more or less they're constructing a global company store.
Yeah.
Where we often
Yeah.
buy their products. And this is illustrated perhaps in, if you look at the thousands and thousands of corporations, the top corporations in the world, how you look at interlocking directorates, and all of a sudden you see sort of a corporate elite or corporate community, and within this interlocking directorates community, you see coordination in terms of policy and strategy imposing a business model, this concentration of wealth. And you mentioned how people are sort of indifferent or numb to this. And good example, if you get a lot of people, Catherine Austin Fitts tells the story, but the red button, and I'll just paraphrase it. But if let's say you get a group of shareholders of a major corporation, and you demonstrate to them this corporation is a beneficiary of laundered drug money, which hypes the stock up, which then earnings to share puffs up their portfolios, and you show them this, and they say, if we were to press a button and be able to shut down the global drug trade overnight and end the stream of revenue, the source of funding, and end much of the drug problem in America, would you do it? And most people wouldn't, because it would cause their portfolios to shrink, and their retirement plans would be ruined. And this is how people worship mammon. They lose, but the thing is, the way they do it, they simply don't think about it. They don't, they're not forced to think about it, so they don't have to think. But when they do think about it, what would they choose? Do the right thing, or make sure they keep getting their pensions, and the Social Security checks. So that's part of the problem, is indifference. But the same time, you just kind of through the corporations, you get into the actual. We can kind of peek into the window of the New World Order and how it functions. In the same way that we talk about drawing a schematic, we can see sort of the contours of the New World Order and these connections to these corporations. And obviously, when they meet and strategize, whether it's at Bilderberg or at Davos, the World Economic Forum, or even when they're running around the woods over there at Bohemian Grove.
Yeah.
So this is kind of these soirees. So it's a very small community, sort of a global social registry of a very elite few, and the more it gets concentrated, the less options or alternatives that the public has in terms of employment and also buying goods and services. And then again, then we are indeed on the company store, and then that's part of the problem. Good example is how, with this globalization, sort of this concentration, whether it's everyone's shopping at a Walmart or an Amazon store, or these companies owning grocery stores or even clothing stores and lines and these things, everything we buy, is and also where we seek employment, is these corporations can impose sort of a new culture or order on society without having to bother something like legislation. Something as political or as crude as that, simply by carrying out certain policies, human resources policies, and these things. And we've seen a good example of this is why are global corporations, if you look around the world, some people call it global homo or something, they're imposing all the degenerate aspects of Western culture on the world. Everywhere where the U.S. expands its power, in come these corporations to disrupt the local cultures and impose, give them freedom by bringing in Burger King and H&M and Starbucks and these things and McDonald's. Well, along with that also comes the culture, the base culture, and one example of that is when you see attempts to resist this agenda. A few examples I have is in Indiana, when the court there, I think, ruled that Indiana had to respect gay marriage licenses. And the political response was for the legislature to pass the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which exempted businesses from having to like if you're a bed and breakfast or something, you have to rent a room out to a homosexual couple or something. You have the right to refuse that. These things you would assume people in a free society would have. And what happened wasn't repealed. Well, eventually it was, from what I understand. At the time, Mike Pence, the current vice president, was the governor. Corporations came down and threatened to pull their offices, their headquarters, or their businesses out of the state if they didn't repeal that law. Now, why would these corporations be concerned about the issue of gay marriage or the Religious Freedom Restoration Act? Obviously, they're pushing a cultural agenda. You had the same example in Georgia when Georgia was considering a law protecting traditional marriage. And so what happened was the NFL, of all entities, threatened to pull the Super Bowl out of Georgia if the law was passed. Now, why would the NFL be interested in pushing gay marriage? You'd think the type of people who sit down, veg out on a couch and watch football on a Sunday, they may not give much thought to it, but you would think they're probably inclined to support traditional marriage. So why would the NFL, be supporting gay marriage? And you had a similar case in North Carolina when the city of Charlotte passed that stupid bathroom bill, respecting transgender, and then the state stepped in and superseded the law, repealed it. Also, North Carolina was in the gun sites of the New World Order, and the NCAA threatened to boycott the state. Now, why would the NCAA, which is the national, college basketball, be concerned about this absurd law in Charlotte, which was rightfully overturned by the state government? Well, they're pushing an agenda. These are corporations, so it's entertainment, it's business, these things. Well, the corporations. A good example is Lloyd Blankfein, the head of Goldman Sachs, the vampire squid of Wall Street. Pretty much this criminal enterprise. He's come out and supported gay marriage. Now, why? Why would this is the finance? Why are they concerned? Well, because the oligarchs support that agenda because that's the ultimate atomization. You break up traditional families, you break up communities, and that's great for mass marketing and imposing a global order where marketing is easy and you can increase volumes of sales and expand your power and profit margin. Ultimately, your power in these things. So that's an example of that.
That's absolutely brilliant. I love your analogy. It's a global company store.
Global company store, yeah.
I mean, that is such a good description of what the situation we're living in. It is just, this is what they're creating. It's a where every aspect of the economy is just part of a slave system. And, you're basically given a wage that is just enough to keep you in debt.
Yeah, and remember in the past you'd have a local. Yeah, in the past you'd have locally owned businesses, and the profits from those businesses would be deposited in local banks, local economies.
Yeah, but I had a comment. You'd asked, I think rhetorically perhaps, why the NFL is supporting gay rights to such a degree, and I was going to point out it's because almost all of the linebackers are gay.
NFL's dark secret.
Yeah, that's that. Anyway, but the thing that is also important. You alluded to it. And I was just going to underline it. Is that you can really see the malevolence in motion when you look at corporations that are all disparate. Right? They're all different kinds. They come from different places. But they all, just for some reason, absolutely must adhere to the most debased level of cultural Marxism that exists. Mm-hmm. Every single one of them. I mean, you bring out another step down the ladder of moral degeneracy, same-sex bathrooms, polysexual operations. I mean, just name it.
Sex bots.
Yeah, I mean, immediately the corporation said this becomes a standard. And then it not only becomes a standard, it's something that they will defend and leave you high and dry without the company store if you don't, as a state or political entity, adhere to this. And so you can see how clever the structure is, right, of corporatism, because the citizen doesn't see the slavery. The citizen complains about, a political system that isn't working properly, but thinks that he can somehow, or in some way, elect Donald Trump and the swamp will be drained or something. But if they would, I think, look a little deeper, they would see that actually the fascism is already there. They just don't recognize it. The corporations, the government, they're all in the power sense are just part of the secret society. And then they come up with just very clever ways to ratchet up the slave state to the intensity of it, the control of it. And but they do it in ways that we don't see it happening. And that's why corporatism is so dangerous and why we need to expose it, is because it isn't, really reflective of just an economic psychopath, but now they are cultural psychopaths. They can implement really degenerate, through health and HR policies, right?
Yeah.
That you can't complain about having like a transgender in your cubicle, because this is the official health and resources policy of IBM.
Yeah.
So that your ability to just express your normal humanity is being whittled away. And this is really, you can see what like you talk about, it always gets to family, it gets to just the healthy psychology. But these are the targets. This is what corporatism is designed to destroy. And, in front of it, the first level of mask that they have is that they're representing, like sex, drugs, and rock and roll, that we're liberal. That this is, that's why, IBM has a liberal policy in regards to transgenders. Mm-hmm. Right. But, and everyone is going to benefit from a more liberated sexual environment. Right. And so this, unfortunately, is not the purpose of it. This is just, the purpose is not to try to take us to this better world. The purpose is always just to try to create this, more effective slave state. So, corporatism, yeah, it's one of their key tricks. And, but, I would just say that sometimes people get confused semantically and they think that corporatism is the problem. And if you could break apart corporatism, that you would, what would emerge would be this, healthy, kind of culture. Corporatism is one of the techniques, and it doesn't create the degeneracy. In other words, some people have made the case that corporatism is the prime mover of the moral degeneracy, the economic slavery. It isn't. Corporatism is just a technique that the people who are onsetting all that use to bring it about.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's the corporate boardrooms where the culture is determined, but yeah, they're following some sort of agenda. Well, one thing that is disturbing, if you look at recent coordinated crackdown on the internet, where people are being deplatformed or cut off from their payment services, whether it's PayPal or MasterCard, Visa, WordPress shutting down some websites, YouTube. You had the whole Alex Jones thing where he's been kicked off of YouTube, and Apple and Spotify and these things, and they're all doing it apparently at the same time. And this isn't so much to defend Alex Jones or whatever blogger is out there who's been banned, whether it's one of these websites, but the fact that because everyone is dependent or become used to utilizing the internet or digital communications, whether it's financial, these things, that the corporations that provide these services can cut them off because of their terms and conditions that are so vague, in bad faith. And despite the fact that you've paid for the services and you expect, since you've paid for the service, you expect service, they can cut you off immediately and leave you out there high and dry. and shut you off, and more or less engage in sort of a form of ostracism, because you're a miscreant. You don't go. You're not following the game plan. You're a victim of hate speech, as they say. Well, what defines hate speech? What is hate speech? Your Twitter will say we don't want to promote hate speech, or YouTube will say, this is hateful, this is offensive to some, and these things. Well, it's free speech. It's always going to be offending. You're always going to risk offending someone when you're speaking freely, I suppose. But who really defines these things? It's very vague. But nevertheless, outfit like WordPress, where people pay for these platforms, for like business plans that they sell, then they just cut them off, and there's no recourse. I'd have to assume there's probably some lawyer out there could find legal recourse. This is sort of bad contract or bad faith or something. But yeah, again, the idea, the apparent coordination suggests to me that perhaps the type of people that get together in Silicon Valley and realize we're all kind of the same type of degenerates, we all believe the same thing. Hey, let's cut off some of these people. Let's pull that rug out from under them so that they can't speak. They can't get their voice out anymore. We can suppress this free speech. But in essence, what happens is if you rely on corporations for your free speech, for your platform, for your voice out there, and they can just say, well, because we're a private company, we don't want to do business with you anymore. They can, in essence, effectively shut down free speech in society, because that's how people communicate now.
Exactly. Well said. That's the whole point, is that they can use the corporate policy of opposition to hate speech as a way to circumvent the First Amendment.
A good example of that is what's considered hate speech. If I were to come on and criticize, say, I criticize homosexuality as a lifestyle, and they say that's hateful. How's that hateful? I mean, based on my understanding, let's say, hey, I'm a Roman Catholic. And I believe in spiritual acts of mercy. And part of the spiritual acts of mercy is correcting, educating the ignorant and correcting the wrong.
Yeah.
So if I don't tell them that it's wrong, unnatural, and dangerous, I'm committing a sin. But under the New World Order, this is hateful because I'm criticizing somebody. And I'm criticizing them not out of hate, but out of love. You see how that, it's like, what are you talking about?
Ultimately, it's just political power.
Yeah.
The oligarchs have it. Catholics don't. And so they just get beaten up when they try to behave like Roman Catholics. And when the people who have like sexually questionable lifestyles, come into the corporation, they have the whole weight of cultural Marxism and the government in back of them. Mm-hmm. And if that doesn't work, the corporations can just hide behind the corporatism. And so, you can see what, it's kind of, this is like, it often happens to us, Tim. It's a little depressing because you can see how vast the organization structure. If we did the schematic, the flow chart, you'd see there's just so many elements of the enslavement, right? You have the government, you have the financial system, you have the media, and then you also have all the company store, right? That are all of these things are aligned. So how to rebel? Well, the first thing is to just be aware that the process is going on. We just have to always bring up the elements of the enslavement for discussion. It's kind of interesting. I was thinking that because this is the week that the anniversary of September 11th, and that was, I think, the moment when the alert citizen should have become aware that there is a secret society. It rules government, it rules the media, it obviously rules the financial world, and so we are 17 years from that moment. And, one hopes that the awareness of it wasn't the box cutters, Arab box cutters, it was the secret society in motion. One hopes that the awareness of that will never stop growing. I've looked at some statistics I did a couple shows about, I was interviewed about my feelings about 911, my opinions on it and things. And I got talking to some people who are sort of specialists in it. And everyone says that the government story is not working. It's just steadily, every year that goes by, there are more people that just don't buy it. So let's hope that corporatism will fall into this growing consciousness, right? That it becomes something people become aware of, because you don't want to get into accepting living in the company store. It's bad enough we have to live in it, but we should never have our minds, thinking that this is not a weapon against us. And we should always be trying to look for alternatives to the company store. If it is just small things like in my community, we do what's called a seed swap. I don't know if you've ever seen these, but we have a lot of people that have their own gardens and grow their own food. And so because the organic seeds are basically being made harder and harder to get, Monsanto controlled most of them, and they just basically were stopping the production of them. So little by little, though, people are just starting their own seed swaps where you come to these things and everyone just exchanges seeds, and there'll be like 1,000 people. And that, is an actual practical way to avoid the corporatism.
Yeah, it's completely outside the cash economy, too.
Outside the cash economy, and the biology that, is engendered is also outside.
Yeah.
Because the seeds are not something that are owned. I mean,
yes. Yeah, they're not patented seeds.
Yeah, I mean, if you eat,
patented DNA.
Yeah, I mean, if you eat, anyone who sort of unwittingly, goes and buys bread that is created out of, wheat whose DNA is owned by a corporation. I mean, you are just walking, right into slavery. It's just crazy to do such a thing, So that's one of the first things that I would hope people be aware of is just, the food. Step back from the corporatism in the food. Step back from the genetically modified, plants and whatnot, and just insist that, that the food you eat is something else. I'll tell you one area where corporatism like a small victory, but there it is in Costco. At least in our community, 10 years ago, there wasn't I would say, probably in the entire store, there may have been one or two organic items. Now, I would bet it's close to 50%. And that's completely market driven. They're just trying to make money. More and more people are worried. And what they found was if they put out an organic item, that it would literally outsell the corporate products next to it. Mm-hmm. Like the organic chicken has pushed the GMO chicken basically out of the store. No one will buy it anymore. And they even have like organic tequila and organic beer. Now, this is amazing because one of the prime movers in this are the college kids. This store, Costco, is right next to UCSB, mm-hmm. which is a degenerate cultural Marxist institution. But the students, I guess, are not completely in the thrall of the intellectual monster, because they're demanding that the food that they eat is not poison, even down to the tequila. You're just amazing. You go in there and you see like organic tequila, organic beer, and the kids are just drinking it like crazy. So this is something that, and in the process of doing that, you're affecting a lot of companies then have to change behavior, because if they're going to produce something that can be sold, they're going to have to, maybe have a fraction of the land organic. And this is a way to, actually start moving things in the right direction. But moreover, the people themselves, where like what I would say, like one area of like kind of healthy rebellion is in the lines, the checkout lines at Costco, because it's amazing how often people will talk about they don't want to eat any of the crap, and they exchange information. See, the food is kind of, to me, that's like the first non-intimidation area. 10 years ago, if you had just tried to like promote organic food, people had looked at you like you were a homeless person. They would have been
Yeah.
afraid. But now it is completely typical, because what happens is you have these giant checkout, these huge grocery cart things, where you have like $500 worth of useless crap, but there's all these organic food items in it. Well, anyway, people talk and you can hear it. It's just all the time I'm noticing these conversations. Well, let's hope that this is like a step towards sanity where the people don't realize it, but they're actually talking in a way that is in opposition to corporatism. And then if this is an area where they can be free and discuss how, well, the GMO food is killing us, then maybe from there they can go to the idea of like, well, maybe it's deliberate. Maybe this is just the new world order and they're dumbing us down and making us sick and impotent. And so then from there, maybe the discussion can go into, 911 doesn't make any sense either, right? Mm-hmm. You see, so it's not like it's completely helpless. It's not like our minds have been permanently wrecked. This is a good example of how we can actually just use our wits and our senses to recognize that where they're taking us is not healthy in any way, and do something about it.
Yeah, and starting a discussion. Of course, again, if you start a blog, start talking about it, they might shut you down. So,
yeah, that's right.
But it's interesting because this last month we had this apparent crackdown on so many websites from the alternative media, and it appeared to be coordinated. And the argument goes, well, Google, YouTube, Facebook, these are private companies, and they can decide who they want to do business with, who they want to have on their platforms, and no one has a right to access these platforms because they're private companies. Well, they're really not private companies because Google, Facebook, they were lavished with Silicon Valley in general was lavished with taxpayer dollars for decades. At least Silicon Valley, Facebook. And Google, has a contract with the CIA and the Defense Department, and of course Amazon has a big contract with the CIA and these things. So they're lavished with federal dollars, and this helps them grow and dominate the market, and then impose a monopoly. And then with our money, they establish a monopoly, and then shut us down. And same thing with outfits like WordPress or something. Again. If you look at something like the case of Facebook, which, according to the movie The Social Network, the big funder was Peter Thiel with his $500,000. Well, it turns out, another investor poured in almost $13 million, and for some reason the movie doesn't mention that investor. And that investor was In-Q-Tel, which was the CIA's investment agency. So In-Q-Tel was the major funder for Facebook. And so was DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Project, the Defense Army Advanced Research Project, DARPA. And so these outfits, and this traces back to full information awareness and these things, total information awareness program, which was allegedly scrapped and then renamed and implemented through Facebook because it's a huge data mining operation, and that's what we're finding out with that recent scandal. What was it called again? The scandal basically Facebook was just selling the data.
I didn't even know there was a name for it.
Yeah. Anyway, well, that's obvious, and so you have Facebook that's being funded with almost $13 million startup money from the CIA. Ditto with Google. And probably ditto with all the major telecoms and Silicon Valley operations, communication outfits. They have huge federal contracts and these things. And so, they really are not private companies. The same way, they're private in the same way that Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman are. Sure. Private companies.
Tim, are you thinking of the Cambridge Analytica data scandal?
Yes, okay. Cambridge Analytica. All right,
sorry. Yeah.
See, it's a massive data mining operation, which
that's
what
right.
it was. And that's, and that's total information awareness. That can be used to all types of reasons: marketing, control, manipulation, tagging. And so if someone goes and uses his platform, gets marked as a miscreant or something, and he can then be ostracized and ruined. But again, these platforms. I mean, you know something about Silicon Valley and its connections to the deep state, to the national security state. These weren't entrepreneurial free market operations. They were lavished from the get go with billions and billions of federal dollars. And so, then and I mean, even something like Disney, the Disney Maker Corporation, Disney, how it dominates entertainment. These things. Well, it was helped. The CIA helped set up Disney.
Yeah, of course. I mean, look at the MK Ultra corporations and like SRI. There, and then from there, look at the relationship into DARPA. You can see that it's completely fascistic. I mean, the government is, controlling corporations. I think that almost all of the New World Order corporations have fake economics. I know I couldn't really prove this, but I don't think Amazon is a real corporation. I think it's always lost money and it always will.
Doesn't matter, right? Because it's all funny money. I mean, talk about a corporation. Let's talk about the corporation called the Federal Reserve, how the dollar dominates the global economy.
That's exactly. But you see, so what happens is the New World Order are these oligarchs, the secret society, the Mason crypto, whatever you want to call this thing, they work out the slave state, the future of it, and then they design basically corporate aspects of it, and then you get the funding. Then it's suddenly, out of nowhere, supposedly from the garage, right? A couple, clever, computer guys, suddenly pop up, and there you have this. The next thing you know, they're on the halftime of the NFL Super Bowl, and so this is. It's like the story about Bill Gates and IBM, how Microsoft was given the operating system of the IBM personal computer, even though Microsoft didn't really even exist, and they certainly didn't have an operating system, nor did they have anybody who could write any code. But this is what IBM did because it just makes a lot of sense. And then you look into Bill Gates' family background, and you go, well, gee. Head of Planned Parenthood. So somehow you get a bad feeling about all this. But I will tell you, Tim, that I'm someone, I'm morally suspect in many areas of my life. And in fact, as you know, many people are quite certain of that. But I think I know the New World Order, how it operates, to the extent that, like with Tesla. I get a lot of criticisms because I own one of those cars, even though I'm trying to write with my ownership, because basically I want to get off the slave oil system, right? Where I produce my own electricity and have my own little, independent world. But nevertheless, that really wasn't completely why I got behind the car. There were two things. One, I don't know if you've ever seen the list of subsidies of the government that Elon Musk has arranged, but it's just beyond belief. It's just $10 billion. So this is one of the trademarks of a corporation that doesn't have to ever earn money, is that it is given a strange large volume of funding from the government. And this is why, Amazon is so suspicious, because of its peculiar funding, the fact it never has to make any money. But with Tesla, I'll give you another thing that really caught my eye. I read a review of the Model 3, the latest car that Tesla is selling. And the guys who did the review, they took the car apart and they go, this is light years ahead of their competition. And they called basically the drive, or the what do they call it? The engine, basically the propulsion system. They said this is military grade technology. That's the only way they could describe it. They go, this is military grade. That's how good this is. They go, how can these crazed hippie? Elon Musk is smoking dope, and he's, it's just this crazy spaced out character. But then he's got advances somehow in the, induction engine, which are military grade. Well, my feeling is you're looking at, they want a self-driving car because that's one of the ways they can take away that aspect of freedom. That's how they can know where you are. But to get you to have that car, they have to make a really good car, don't they? It's like, that you won't use the iPhone if it isn't a handy gadget, if it doesn't do a lot of little neat things for you.
Yes.
So there's always the sugar to get you to eat the poison. So that's what I think of Tesla. Now, okay, I bought the car, and it's a hell of a car, incidentally. But when you understand corporatism, you can actually anticipate, I think, which corporations are going to succeed. I don't think that this creates a moral reason to support them. However,
Yeah.
and I do, wonder about like the actual, is this a really good idea? But it's the same thing with the internet. You could see that the internet was something that was obviously, just look at Stuart Brand's relationship to DARPA, to the mouse, to the personal computer. For heaven's sakes, if this is the guy who was on the bus with Ken Kesey, MK Ultra project, and he's the one who came up with the expression personal computer. Mm-hmm. He was selling it as something that's hip, that's liberating. See, you can see the corporatism in action. This isn't really just a device for the government to watch you and keep control of you with and give you propaganda. This is a personal computer, dude. You can use the mouse. Look, click on it. There you go. Now you can play a Space Invaders, and then look, here's some pornography. It's terrific. Your life is so much better now. But you understand corporatism, and all this just makes a lot of sense. It's not hard to know what they're trying to do to us.
Well, yeah, obviously they drew you in by making it, obviously attractive and convenient and these things, but it is through the digitized, internet that they have access to, they get total information awareness. And you buy at Amazon, or you buy, and all your purchases are monitored, and it also affects how things are marketed to you. It's all big data. And so where you drive, your phone will monitor where you drive, and your phone would tell you, how'd you like your visit to such and such, and they'll show restaurants in the area and these things. Now, these things all seem very benign because they're just selling products, but these things can be very easily weaponized, and they are weaponized because everyone has a potential control file, and so if you become troublesome, they can, they could monitor your patterns and these things and predict things and these things. You also have a process of, I mentioned it as of ostracism. The potential for ostracism is great here because you have no anonymity. You don't have cash. The great thing about cash is it's anonymous. If every purchase is indeed electronic or something, every purchase is being monitored, and whatever tool you use to make those electronic purchases, if the vendor decides not to have you as a customer, then you're out of luck. You have essentially been ostracized from society, and you become immediately impoverished. This kind of thing occurred in Eastern Europe, East Germany. They had a thing called disintegration, where there was a person who had run afoul of the state, and instead of showing up, knocking on his door at 3 a.m. and dragging him off to some prison or gulag somewhere, they quite often just slowly disintegrated his life by ostracizing him, making him lose his job, lose his friends, get alienated from his family to the point where he eventually will commit suicide. And you can do that now. That same technique can be applied here in the West. And don't be too surprised that it is, because from what I understand is when they established the Department of Homeland Security in 2002, and it was in the works before 2001. One of the advisors was a former Wolf, the former Stasi official, who provided a consultant. He was a consultant in setting it up.
Yeah, so, thanks a lot.
That and the Phoenix program in Vietnam. So they were the inspirations for today's Department of Homeland Security and the fusion centers and these things. So all this data is being fed into. So this is the problem with corporations. Good example. If you do have a good example, you remember this was about 2004, I guess, when the wiretapping scandal broke out with the Bush administration. It turns out they were violating the FISA law and doing mass, I guess, data mining violation of the FISA law. No one ever went to jail for that, by the way, nor was ever prosecuted. But anyway, in fact, Congress passed a retroactive law legalizing it, therefore recognizing that it was indeed illegal at the time. But I think it was Quest Communications was a telecom that didn't cooperate with the NSA, and the CEO was then brought up on insider trading charges and went to jail. I think his name was Nacho or something, if I get the name correct. But the one company that didn't cooperate was brought up on federal charges of insider trading. So they got the message. So it's very easy to get these corporations, even if there is some resistance, to get them to go along with the plan.
Yeah, so they can, you can see how they can manipulate corporatism in any way they want. I wanted to give an example, because it's just in my mind of how quickly the control over movement can onset here because we don't see the corporatism. In the car that I have, they have an app which is called Tesla Rideshare. Have you ever heard of it?
No, but
okay. Well, it's not a theoretical thing. It's actually, the car is actually able to do it right now. They're beta testing it in different areas. They've had a few problems. They've killed a couple people, but no big deal. They're getting the bugs worked out. But the fact is, the car is designed right now. I mean, it's actually an app in the car that is ready to be, if it is certified by the state of California, it's just an update that you would pay for, I think, a little bit of money, but then the car would do it. Now, what this is, it's basically a self-driving function of the car where it's like Uber, where if you're not going to use the car for like 5 hours, you just hit a button, and the car is completely wired into every imaginable kind. I mean, it's just like a walking Wi-Fi, the car. It just gets, you name it, and it has access to every imaginable thing in the internet. It's just, there's all this military grade technology in it. But with Tesla Rideshare, you hit a button and you say, I'm not going to be using it for 5 hours. Now, if someone needs a ride, they just put in there, and they're part of the Tesla Rideshare program. They just hit the button, and then your car will leave, say goodbye to you, go and pick the guy up, take him to wherever he goes, and then come back, and you and Tesla split the money.
Yeah, I figured they'd monetize it somehow.
Well, yeah. And now, okay, now you go, well, wait a second. I don't want a stranger in my car. No problem. Tesla's got like 8 video cameras in the thing. So you see how,
I'm sure no one else is watching, Joe.
Oh, right, of course. Now bear in mind, this isn't theoretical technology. It's in my driveway right now. I'm staring at it. So you can now, Mercedes, they have their concept cars, the 10-year out cars. Tim, they don't even have a steering wheel. The passengers all sit staring at each other in a circle. So this isn't, so this is, you can see how quickly this all is going to onset, because once they take over the self-driving aspect, now, believe me, this is 100% part of the new world order structure.
Well,
right?
now instead of concentrating on the road and driving, you can spend your commute doing selfies and tweeting about last night's Bachelor episode or something. Episode.
The car already does this. I mean, like, if I want to drive from Santa Barbara to San Francisco, I can just turn on the autopilot and go to sleep. The car will, I don't know if we'd make it, but the car will literally try to get there. I mean, it stays in the lane. It has radar and God knows what else, how it does it, but it actually drives. I mean, we went down to Los Angeles. We turned on this thing. And it's just the most terrifying thing you've ever seen in your life, because, the car is just doing it. It's just deciding where to go. But this isn't theoretical technology. And that's why when they ripped apart they call it the drive, the engine basically of the thing, and they came to the conclusion that it was military grade, I just thought, oh my God, this is very clear to me.
Does it have ejector seats?
I'm afraid it does, but you don't control them.
Yeah.
This would be if you're late in a payment to Tesla, they will threaten you with the thing.
But that's interesting that a character like Tesla. I mean, sorry, like Elon Musk,
Yeah.
Bill Gates, Stephen Jobs. I don't know. Again, these are figure even to Zuckerberg. These are certain characters that are put out there. We're supposed to believe these are titans of industry. They're geniuses. They're just these guys, and I'm starting to think that these are just kind of faces put on a product, like I don't know, like Betty Crocker or something, Ronald McDonald.
Absolutely. I mean, in my opinion, I think that the template there is Gates.
Yeah.
I mean, that relationship between Microsoft and IBM is so fake. It is just it is just a side-splitting, howling laughter fake. I mean, this is just preposterous. I happen to know a little bit about it because I was actually in that exact area.
Mm-hmm.
I had a company that was involved in operating systems, and in fact, IBM operating system. That was our platform that we built our products around. It was a different computer, but so I knew an awful lot about IBM operating systems at that time. And the idea that they would turn over to this guy who couldn't code was just ludicrous. I had no idea what it was. We all thought it was some kind of like payola thing or something. There was something weird, but it turned out now it was just the New World Order was basically getting itself set up, and they were creating a new face, a new division with Microsoft. And then they roll out Apple. You always have the fresh face, right? This isn't the monolithic IBM. People might resist, right, if it was just a single corporation. So they have to change brands constantly.
Yes, I mean, obviously, I alluded to earlier. You have two interlocking directorates. Ultimately, at one level, these corporations are being run by a small group of people, and we're given the illusion that Apple's competing with Microsoft, or General Motors is competing with Ford.
Or Facebook is different than Google. I mean, look, it's all just one giant slave system in a computer. And IBM is no longer in play. It's an old-fashioned fuddy-duddy big machine computer thing. But believe me, it's all just one giant system. And they have these different divisions, so you don't see that. So you don't see that every single aspect of it is controlled by this small group.
It's the same way the Pittsburgh Steelers will play the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah,
but it's the NFL.
I mean, see, we've talked about how the one of the basic tools they use against us is the fake dialectic. Mm-hmm. So you see Apple basically as a rebellion against IBM, right? I mean, it's not one big slave system. No, it's they had these ads when Apple was bringing out its personal computer of like a rebellion, 1984, and this was the way you rebel. And IBM was representing the government in the ads. You're probably too young to remember.
I remember that the woman
throws the
hammer at the big screen.
Yeah, so this was the way that they were selling this, and so. But this is all fake. It's all just one giant system. And though one of the places where this pops up, where you can actually see it, is when you get the fake funding. When you look at a company like Amazon, you go, well, gee, it has a stock value of $1 trillion. It is everywhere, right? It's basically in every single part of our life. Now, how did it get so big if it never made any money? Well, I mean, is Bezos just, a business genius? No, it's because what you're looking at, Tim, is military-grade technology.
Yeah.
That's what you're looking at. That's why, like there's all this stuff now like Tesla, will it succeed? Elon Musk, he's crazy. He smokes dope. He goes on Joe Rogan, which is kind of a black mark on Joe Rogan. But anyway, so, I think that's just part of the facade, that they give you eccentrics, right? Like Stephen Jobs, Mm-hmm. Or even Gates at the beginning of his career, when he was seen as this like youngster hacker, genius. He was this eccentric, so different from IBM. This is all nonsense. This is just a facade. They just have this fake dialectic. There's no struggle at all. Amazon, Google, Facebook, it's all the same thing. And so I think Tesla is plugging right into it. And I think you may have another company pop up with another self-driving, and who knows, maybe even Tesla will disappear at some point. But the aspect of the control will go on. you're not going to suddenly, have like the oligarchs less interested in self-driving cars.
Hmm.
And incidentally, this is why they're electric. It's a little technologic bonbon. The gas engines are just harder to control because you have like a really complicated transmission, and so for self-driving cars, the electric, the induction engine is just ideal because it's binary, it's on or off, just super simple to control it, and so that's why electric cars, because they have a mind that they're going to take away even the freedom of driving your own car. So, you know, hopefully, people will recognize that, Amazon isn't just a peculiar company that's worth $1 trillion but never makes any money, but rather it's part of, government activity against the citizens' freedom.
An example of a personal example I have of the freedom you get if you don't work for a large corporation and perhaps a small company is I've worked for both, and one thing is that when you're with a small company or that isn't corporate, it's independently owned, you have a much more greater freedom of expression. You don't have to deal with the human resources BS, the politically correct stuff. You're just a lot freer. And
Yeah.
and I've worked for like large corporations that were major recipients of federal contracts, and immediately you saw the difference where people didn't want to express themselves. They're all in the corporate straitjacket, and little things like sensitivity training courses, diversity training, tolerance training, where you sit in these courses and some company comes and is brought in, some consulting company comes in, and they insult your intelligence for 2 hours. I had one, I remember sitting in one, this was back in the mid-90s, I was told that for some people, time is relative. So you can't judge them if they're coming to work late all the time. This is, so I was like, oh, really? So if they, I don't know, maybe if they don't show up to work at all and they still submit their time card because time is relative, that's not fraud. I was like, what? But this is the type of nonsense you have to suffer if you work for some of these larger corporations.
But there it is. That's the corporatism. It's they're able to not only get away from the First Amendment, but they can basically create an environment where the intimidation. It's always the legal side and then the intimidation side, and when they control the environment like that, the intimidation just becomes. I mean, these corporations are not going to be where you're going to have rebellion really get started from. I mean, it's sad because they have so much, youth and really smart people, but they're so tightly controlled.
Well, with the control of capital and also with the black market economy, which is much bigger than I think that people realize, and how that affects things like Wall Street. I've talked about this in the past. Is this sort of this corporate concentration is a product of one thing is the manipulation or the directing of capital to favored corporations, so they get bigger and bigger. Or some companies will profit off of the illegal drug trade by being more or less laundering operations for it. And that, a good example of that was Richard Grasso, who was the president of the New York Stock Exchange, meeting with FARC guerrillas down in South America who were dealing drugs to fund their operations. He went down there to convince them to invest their proceeds in Wall Street. And when they reportedly said no, that's when Plan Colombia was kicked in by Clinton, and they became a target of the drug war because they want those funds. They were keeping the funds local, reportedly. And that first time I heard of that was with Michael Rupert when he talked about it right after 9/11. But then Catherine Austin Fitz talks about it. I've heard other companies. I've heard stories, companies like Tyson's Chicken and also Walmart being utilized for more or less laundering money, and that's how it grew so fast. This retail operation grew so fast. It's also Walmart's rise coincided with sort of the in the 1970s and the rise of the petrodollar and what is happening in China and the emergence of China as a manufacturing center for the world. And of course, Walmart markets so many of the things that are manufactured in China. And
Yeah, I
she
don't know if
says,
you ever saw it, but there was when Walmart was going to go from just being a little tiny, stupid Arkansas, like five and dime kind of deal with a few stores to a big corporate push, right? It had like a corporate party. There's actually YouTube of this, and the whole Bush family shows up. George and Jr. and I mean, they all came. You know, you could just see that.
were the Clintons there too? Because they were in
I
business.
don't know. I mean, that's a good question.
Because
But
if you look at it, is what was occurring in Arkansas in the 80s? What capitals?
Exactly,
well,
yeah.
Mena, Arkansas, right? And the
Yeah.
iron counter drug trade, and that was part of the Arkansas Development Finance Corporation, which funded Whitewater, for reportedly like Walmart's development, and that's how the funds are more or less laundered or filtered into the mainstream economy.
I always thought that like one kind of investment newsletter I'd like to see is like New World Order investing.
Yeah.
And basically you would look for things like, the Bush family showed up at this podunk company's, inaugural party. The government supporting, we're going to invest in this. In other words, rather than like something absurd like having a good business plan or good management, the New World Order newsletter would just look for the slime ball connections into government funding and things like this, and it would just give recommendations just on that basis. I mean, in hindsight, when you look at like how fake Amazon is, I mean, this is $1 trillion market cap. Isn't that strange? But for a company that can't make any money, it's strange,
Yeah.
But the thing is that. There and in fact, if you go back and look at the like the articles about Amazon, there was a long period of time when people were wondering if it was even going to continue to exist.
I remember that. Yeah, people talking.
Okay,
Yeah.
and I wonder if you, but there was actually this long period of time going, well, it's kind of a great idea, use the internet, but it doesn't look like it's going to make it. Not enough business savvy, no income coming in. There's a chance it's going to collapse, but somehow it kept expanding, and that is, in my opinion, the marker. That's
the problem of applying normal economic analysis to a situation which isn't economic; it's military.
Exactly. You're not dealing with economic. You're simply dealing with a cover story.
Yeah. How are U.S. Treasuries AAA rated when the U.S. government has a $22 trillion debt?
Right. Well, and how did we should have known that Microsoft was going to be worth $1 trillion when it got the contract to have IBM's operating system for the personal computer, even though it didn't even have any programmers or an operating system. I mean, when you see something that it's sort of like the Matrix movie, when you're walking down the street and there's a lady in the red dress. And you go, there's something wrong. The agents are showing up. I mean, there's these little wrinkles in the, that's what you have to look for.
Continuity issues of continuity.
Yeah, continuity issues. It's like here's Tesla, and I think they've lost money constantly. But here comes this new car, and it's got all this amazing self-driving, and it has a military-grade technology in its power plant. And let me tell you something, brother. It is military-grade. I mean, the thing is so fast. It's like faster than a McLaren or something. And that, you can imagine me and my wife, like guys in their 70 with a car that can go 155 miles an hour. This is like the stupidest thing you've ever seen in your life, But it's how they're going, but what they've done is they've just made it so good that they can, I think you're going to see basically millions of these cars within a few years, and then from there they're going to creep in all of the self-driving aspects. But these are the wrinkles in the matrix that you look for in the corporatism, because the primary aspect of it, in my mind, is that it's incoherent. That the companies become powerful in spite of the fact they don't adhere to any kind of market rules or have any market structure to them. They're just these giant debt machines that somehow get bigger and bigger, and of course they're all just massively politically correct. Every single one of these. I mean, you just couldn't. Another marker. The idea, you look into the H&R policies of Amazon or Google. They are the most cultural Marxist proponents you've ever seen. So there it is, right? And this will help you invest. Are we able to give investment advice, Tim? We're going to get in trouble.
Well, just like Google. Remember that the one guy wrote that memo. It was at Google when he was criticizing the affirmative action policies of hiring females. Apparently, if you look at Google, the real creative aspect of it is dominated by white males and males.
Yeah,
Asian males, white males, and women are like 15% of some of the ancillary work, and of course all the minorities work in the kitchen. It's these are just demographics you can't get. But they have this aggressive policy trying to hire females, and he wrote a memo about it, and they just fired him. And the executive came out and talked about it, how it's opportunity there, blah blah blah. But even the executive, if he were to really be hard nosed and business minded, he would have been pilloried in the press and lost his job, because it's not. Google has a cultural agenda. And that's part of that cultural agenda and so they don't care really if it hurts the bottom line for the company, because the company ultimately it's not a profit and loss operation.
Exactly. And I actually think that some of the movie companies are fake too. The networks. I think that if you got into the books, you'd see they're kind of fake. The one aspect, another aspect, as long as I'm putting out these things. One of the other things you look for is great food, because if you think about movie companies, MGM, United, they're secret societies. They have gates and guards, and they have impenetrable areas, right? But then they have the best food imaginable. This is something about like Google, for example. Supposedly, you can't get in. Have you ever tried to get into any of these? You probably never have, but I mean, I've been up in these areas, and I've actually gone into some of these companies. And I mean, it's like going into the Pentagon. I mean, there's more security, and it's just incredible.
It wasn't Silicon Valley has like a lowest vaccination rate or something for their kids.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, these are the rumors, but they are so secretive. Yeah. Believe me, inside those walls, you can't get in. It looks friendly. It's high tech. The Google, and they don't call them like the war room. It's the campus. But the thing is, they're very similar in an odd way to the movie studios, in that they have guard gates. But once you get inside, you're in this little secret society with great food. And so then you're getting huge salaries, right? Because, I mean, Google doesn't have to make money. It just prints it. So they pay like hundreds of thousands of dollars to get the best programmers in, and they give you the great food, so you're happy and content, and you don't really mind the fact that you're on setting snooping device by which the secret society can watch everybody's action, and then also algorithms, right, that can use to predict our behavior. I mean, see, this is so this is the thing, is these are the aspects of the New World Order corporations. I mean, I'm not saying that this is a clear-cut investment concept. It's just something that I've noticed about them over the years, is that they are kind of identifiable. They don't, like you can, there have been already a couple electric car companies that have gone kaput, right? Mm-hmm. But Elon Musk is putting a Tesla S into outer space. Well, gee, how can he do that? I mean, it just seems a little odd. So, these are the things, is that when they defy the normal laws of the marketplace, this is one of the tips, you're dealing with something that's just part of the, slave state technology.
Yeah, and I alluded to it earlier, is the normal laws of economics. Why is the U.S. dollar still the world's reserve currency when its government has the largest debt?
It's really funny, but money is an odd thing. They did a study like years ago I read about, that they were trying to determine, how can the government just spend everything that it wants but still have the dollar work? And the people who did the study, and these were like Bohemian Grove types, they said, well, as long as gold and silver don't go up, you can basically expand the currency base as far as you want. Because the people won't know. There'll be they're just, and when you think about that, it is kind of ingenious. The dollar is really like a religious figure. It's like a religion.
Mm-hmm.
If you believe in the dollar and other people believe in it, then the dollar is real.
Well,
It's
having like paper gold and
yeah,
gold
yeah,
contracts where you rent out gold that doesn't exist will drive the price down. So that
but well, the
covers
government can just, these markets are tiny. They can control the price of gold as long as they want. But the main thing is they can have trillions and trillions of dollars of debt without people going, well, is this currency worth anything?
Yeah,
because it's a religion. It is not a rational marketplace phenomena. One of the key aspects of our intellectual slavery is the belief in money.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we should not believe in it. This would be, hopefully as we transition away from this slave state, one of the things we'll do is we'll realize, well, wait a second, why do we let the Federal Reserve, these families, have the power of creation of the currency? This is insane. So, it's the Federal Reserve is another one of those. I mean, it has a gigantic debt. Its balance sheet now is like $5 trillion. How could it possibly have so much debt and still function? Well, it's like Amazon, it's like Tesla. These are just the business aspect of them is just a facade that's being presented and we believe in. But in back of it, there's simply the power, the control. And the control is what creates the fact that it has, we perceive it as economically powerful. Mm-hmm. Because there is no economics to it. I'll bet you in 10 years, Amazon will still be losing money. And it'll still be expanding, because it's just part of the government. It's not part of
like the Pentagon.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, yeah. So all of these, unless a plane crashes into it.
That was those trillions that missing that Rumsfeld was talking about on September 10th. Well, maybe because someone went to Amazon.
That's how they fund it, probably. Yeah. I think if if anyone ever did an actual audit of it would just be so horrendous. I don't even think that people would believe it. I think there are probably hundreds of trillions of dollars of basically fake money that are just maneuvered around any time that they want, and that the books that are given to us, this 20 trillion in national debt and the
mm-hmm.
Bank debt, that's just completely a drop in the bucket. It means nothing because it doesn't mean anything. I mean, who would among us would really know how much federal debt there is? How would you count it?
Don't they tell us?
I mean, it's like,
well, remember it was back in was it 2008, 2009 when Congress was asking these currency swaps that the Federal Reserve was operating.
Yeah,
and they ranged anywhere from 16 to 23 trillion dollars, and a congressman asked, "Well, who's the recipient of this? Can we open the books on this?" And the Fed said no.
Yeah, right.
Bernanke said no.
It was incredible. They swapped $16 trillion with European banks without telling it. Now, you have to remember, these banks are completely insolvent. That's why the swaps occurred.
Yeah.
They needed dollars because if they tried to use all the euros they had to use at that point, they would have just invented them. They would have crashed the system. So they brought dollars in. But the point is, what if all the banks had seized up and failed?
Mm-hmm.
With the $16 trillion of, and then suddenly the euros that they'd swapped were worth nothing. Well, it would have wrecked the United States. This was a decision that a private company, the Federal Reserve, made without any government oversight. This shows you that, that we don't. The idea of democracy is ludicrous.
What was it when it was Denmark or Holland purchased like $400 billion in treasuries and it exceeded,
No, it was Luxembourg.
It was like.
And they suddenly out of nowhere, because what happens is that this is okay. What happens is they go, the government had to or someone like China dumped $1 trillion in bonds, but the yield stayed the same. How can this be? This defies the laws of of marketplace. Who's buying all of these bonds at this price? And they go, well, who knows? And then the next thing you know, it was, like a month later, it goes, well, it was Luxembourg. Luxembourg just happened to need $1 trillion worth of U.S. Treasury bonds. And I go, well, where did they come up with the money to buy the? No, don't ask that question.
Yeah, well,
I mean, so the whole thing is just, again, this is a faith-based economic system. It's, we don't even want to. If we looked into it honestly, you would see that there is no market or economic reality to any of the Western currencies.
Yeah, they
are all just complete holograms. There is nothing there that's real. They just manipulate. They just tell you, well, there's this much debt. Today, Luxembourg bought 150, and the Japanese sold, and it's just nothing. It's just these are just like pixels on a computer screen, and there's some guy who just sits there and makes everything up to keep it like it's a real story. There's no real economy anymore. It's gone. That's long gone. What we have is just government control, and they give you stories that make you think that there's a process that is a little out of control, but it's legitimate, and the dollar is something that still works. But the only reason it works is because we believe it does. And this just shows you the analogy here, of course, is the Wizard of Oz. I mean, this was, and Frank Baum, who was, he was in the uplifting Lucifer Club with Walt Disney. I don't know. Did you know that? Charming little Masonic club in Santa Monica Canyon. H.R. Haldeman's father was there with them, and they had this lovely club called Uplifting Lucifer, and Baum wrote The Wizard of Oz. Well, as long as I'm rambling here, Oz is it's the second half. It's like the Masonic binary, the New World Order. It's like he was in a library, and you had like A to M and the Dewey Decimal, and the other desk had O to Z. And so the Wizard of Oz is basically, the second half of the replacement of the old world order, the Christian order, and then you have Oz. And the Wizard of Oz, his big tool is he just tells you stuff and you believe it, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Don't look at the man behind the curtain. He's going to give you a brain. He's going to give you heart. And so this is the Federal Reserve. This is what we're dealing with. We're just dealing with the wizard of the Fed.
Mm-hmm. It is wizardry. It's alchemy.
It's alchemy, brother.
So, okay, Joe, think we covered it?
Yeah, I think so. I hope you have a great weekend.
Okay, yeah. I'll talk to you next week, and we'll go from there.
Next week. You will do. Thank you, Tim.
Take it easy. Bye.
Bye-bye.